Okay, I want to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar organized by the TCNJ Art Gallery. And it's organized by the students for the fine art and photo video professional practice class. My name is Lieselotte Wenderheiden. I'm the professor for the class. And I'm just doing here a brief introduction before they will present their work. So first of all, I want to thank you all for being here and to see and hear about the students' artwork. They have been working really hard and they have done some amazing projects, so I hope you will really enjoy tonight. I want to start with thanking our amazing TCNJ institution and the enthusiastic support of Provost Osborne and the School of Arts and Communication Dean Hall and the Art and Art History Department Chair Professor Check. I also want to thank the TCNJ Art Gallery Director Margaret Palazzera Grunland, who is here with us, who we saw before, for hosting this event and running the galleries and really being there for the students as we are pulling everything off. I also have very special thanks for our program assistant, Olivia Burton and Kylo Pinto, for supporting the student access and providing studio access and support. I also want to thank Cara Giddens for supporting the students and the galleries, and thank Professor Marcello Vera, Elizabeth Mackey, and Professor Anita Allen for supporting the students with access of the facilities. I think it's really important, and it has been a major team effort to pull this off in this truly challenging time for so many. This has been a really hard time for everybody in the world, obviously, for our students, privately, publicly, for the institution. It has been very difficult. It has been very difficult to get access to the facilities, and we are really grateful that what we have done so far, because it's truly difficult. But students did amazing work, and we found very good solutions by using the studio, the galleries, the student galleries, and viewing the exhibitions from outdoors. And that worked really well as doing the online exhibitions, which also are a really good alternative. So we are really grateful that we could still provide all these experiences for our students under these challenging circumstances. Tonight we will hear from all our students. First, the group that shows their mini solo shows, as we call them, their mini exhibitions, as part of the professional practice class. They will do the online exhibitions exclusively, and then they are followed by the first group who had the outdoor exhibition shows that closed a week ago. I hope some of you had the opportunity to see them. They were really beautiful and amazing ways of using the facilities, and really beautiful artwork. I also then, as the third group, we will hear from the students whose shows will open tomorrow night from 5:30 to 7. Everyone is welcome. We hope people can attend also in person. Last time it was a wonderful event. I just want to make sure that everybody who will attend to know that it is outdoors only, that everybody is required to wear a mask, and everybody will be screened on the Roar app to make it safe for everybody to attend. But we will hope you will be there and really enjoy art in person, because that is something that we all have missed so much and realize how important that is. So tonight we will have each group present, followed by Q&A before we move to the next group. So the first group will consist of 3 students who do exclusively online, and then we move to the other groups that showed in the galleries. Please submit your questions in the Q&A, and the moderators will ask the questions to the students, and the students will have about 10-15 minutes to answer the questions. We really hope you all participate with questions, because it will make more of a dialogue and interesting, unpredictable event. Without further ado, please give a round of virtual applause to the professional practice students who have worked very hard under very difficult circumstances to make this event happen. We will start with Jaylin Giles Ewell. She will start her first presentation. Jaylin, go ahead.
First, I just want to give like a brief thank you to not only the department for being able to just give me this experience, but also to just my professors, everybody who worked with me in regards to just getting everything together, and also my peers just for sharing this experience. We've all been in classes with each other for around like 4 years now, so it's just really great to see all of our work come into fruition. Just to briefly go over what my show is about, the title of my show is Recontextualizing Black Imagery Through Art History. Um, for the little description for my show, basically what I was trying to do with this show is just to transform iconic art historical paintings in a way that exemplifies Black representation. This exhibition calls awareness to the lack of Black presence in art historical works and also recontextualizes the way that Black people are seen within art while simultaneously educating the viewer from a Black woman's perspective. Um, so just to get into the first series that I have, the title of this series is Remade in Our Image. They're digitally manipulated prints shot on or shot with a Canon EOS 70D. Remade in Our Image is basically a take or a modernized take on 3 iconic classic portraits with female subjects. The idea that the idea for this piece in general came from something that I originally conceptualized in 2017 and revisited this year. The purpose of this piece was basically to recreate classic paintings with Black women as the subjects in order to kind of like jab at the fact that like Black women were rarely represented in artwork back then, let alone in a positive or constructive light. The 3 images that I take reference to are Vermeer's Girl with the Pearl Earring, which I entitled Girl with the Hoop Earring. The next piece is Olympia, which I titled Olympia Remastered. And the last piece is Portrait of Madame T, which is basically like in reference to my friend who was basically part of the shoot. So basically, like I said, I kind of took to these images just to recontextualize how they're viewed. Especially the one that I particularly liked working with was Olympia Remastered, solely because this piece, if anyone is familiar with Monet's original, had a white woman as the main subject with a Black woman or a Black slave in the foreground of the image. This piece, if anything, was probably my favorite to do, only because I had to do a lot of digital manipulation as far as like switching the role, if anything, of like the Black slave or Black slave woman as the white woman within the piece. Um, Definitely something that I was really just, I guess, if anything, it was challenging, but something that really I feel like paid off in the end. But ultimately, like I said, I just kind of wanted to challenge the viewer as far as just seeing these iconic images in a different light. As for the next piece that I have in my show, the next piece is Earth Tone Venus. This piece is around, I want to say 72 feet tall, or not 72 feet tall, I'm sorry, 72 inches tall and 40 inches wide. As for the materials, it's chalk pastels on cardboard, burlap, canvas, and assorted mixed media. Earth Tone Venus, by the name, is an interpretation of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. Many of the materials used were either recycled or found, such as cardboard, burlap, fabric, canvas, and various other like food products. Black Venus is basically kind of like a subtle commentary on the sexualization and fetishization of Black women within the media. The uses of chocolate and chocolate kisses at like the nipples is basically a direct correlation to how Black women are constantly objectified and described by foods, more specifically chocolate. Venus's golden locks were replaced with brown or with Black box braids, and her hands were adorned with long nails. And like I said, she stands like around 6 feet tall. This piece in particular, like I said, was kind of like to take reference to, or yeah, to reference to like fetishization of Black women. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, especially with like the direct note of like chocolate being used within the piece. I used chocolate within like the braids and everything to make like darker values. And like I said, a lot of the materials were recycled from other projects that I had. But that was basically the gist of this piece. My last piece is entitled Ophelia. Ophelia, this is oil on canvas. It's 30 by 40 inches. Ophelia is a modernized take on the John Everett Millais painting created in 1852. There's like a distinct feeling of sadness and like within a placid environment. And within the original painting, there's almost like an acceptance of stagnation, which is kind of what I wanted to get at within this piece. In this painting, I decided to channel my own melancholy almost into the painting, reflecting on like this one night when I was like overthinking in the bath. But like I said, it kind of like was basically like a way of me channeling like the feelings that I was feeling. I painted this earlier this year around, I think, a month or two into quarantine. So basically that was kind of me just pouring like my feelings into this painting in particular. But as for my show, these are the pieces that I had in particular. So yeah, thank you for viewing my artwork. For the next artist, she has absolutely amazing work for all of y'all to see. Her name is Samantha Kearney, and you're gonna hear from her in regard to her show.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Samantha. It's actually Carney, but that's all right. So I have my show here. It's called Kickshaw. And what a kickshaw, as you say, I have the definition on top, is something that's elegant but insubstantial, and it's a worthless delicacy. So I picked the title after I did all of the work. And so what I did, if our hostess wants to scroll down, was I made a bunch of sculptures out of paper. And the first series is the Tiny Paper House series, where I recreated all of the houses that I've lived in out of watercolor paper. They're all cut by hand. Each of the panels, you'll see as she flips through, there's like top views, and you could see all the layers of paper that are used to make these houses. And they're really small. The biggest one is probably 6 inches wide, and that's why I have pictures where I'm holding it in my hand so you could see. So I'll get back to the name after this, but as you flip through, so you see all of these houses, and they're all in different layers, and they're related to the name Kickshaw because the actual houses themselves, not so much the paper houses, the houses where I live, you know, I had to up and move so many times that it's almost like these buildings that meant so much to me, they really are nothing. It was never about the house that I was in. It was always about the people I was with and the family I was with. And you know, my colleagues know that I focus a lot on my family, and my mom especially. You know, we are very close knit, and you know, all of these houses together, they're symbolic of the things that we have done together as a family and why I am here. So relating back to the name Kickshaw, like I said, the houses themselves, they don't mean anything. Really, it's just a building, it's just 4 walls, these are just paper. But in the same note, you know, they were everything and they mean everything. But when you look back, it's, you know, how significant are that? So is that? So you think about all of these things, and it's about reflecting on yourself. This is currently my mom's house, Echo Lane, here. You see her flip through. And then this was my grandparents' house that recently sold. And what I find so interesting about paper, because I have some other works after this too, is that, you know, I've seen paper just totally demolished on the side of the road as newspaper, but I've also seen armor made out of paper. And I like, it kind of speaks about this total versatility of kind of what you experience, and, you know, what you can make of those experiences. You know, you can let something such as moving so much crush you, or you can let it build you up and give you strength. So if you move down, the next piece that I have is I made a set of rosary beads out of paper, and they're really small. So the larger beads that are there, they're actually origami roses, and they're smaller than 1/2 inch each size. Again, this is all done by hand. And I think that this piece speaks to the fragile nature of religion and kind of my unsteady relationship with how I believe in God. And it's the same kind of thing, you know. It's all these questions that you have, and paper being such a fragile material, it just raises all these questions. And you see, there's a picture in my hand. You can see that they're small. It's about the size of an actual rosary set. And then lastly that I have here is I made a paper terrarium. And this piece was my most recent one. And it, to me, it's representative of childhood and fantasy and all these dreams that you have. And, you know, how they're kind of contained and how they're, you know, they have an age, right? And again, being made of paper, how fragile they are and how easily they could be destroyed by anything that comes your way. You can see all my detail shots, right? Again, everything here was done by hand and glued together. So yeah, papers, I love paper, and it's something that I am looking to further in, you know, next semester studies and beyond. So thank you everybody for coming and watching and listening. And we'll save questions for our big discussion board. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Next is, I'm sorry, I wasn't here when they went through everything. Next is our colleague, Madison. She's been working a lot with skin and photography, and it looks gorgeous.
And just a quick reminder, this is Margaret from the Art Gallery. You can type your questions into the Q&A at any time, and we'll address them after each group of students.
Hello everyone, my name is Madison Cascardo. This is my exhibition called Skin. So Skin basically explores the versatility nature within body image. We compare our bodies every day and we break them down, but I wanted to look at them in a way in which they are a landscape and they are art. And I'm beautifying them and also advocating for a positive body image, but also bringing up the fact that there are negative things that we do and say to our body, and we break down our insecurities. So this is kind of, in general, just a breakdown of our bodies. So my first project is a diptych. It is a narrative called Peak. There are two images where I felt like I worked with a lot of photography pieces that I used horizontally to bring up the idea of a landscape, and I really wanted to explore doing vertically and seeing if I could still get the same effect. And I really love these because I brought up the fact that they look kind of like mountaintops and like sceneries that you would look up at. And breaking that down as the high points being, you know, the positive aspects, and the low points of the shadows, and the dips in the curves being kind of the insecurities and how we hide them and we tuck them away, but they're there. And this was one of the first pieces I did that kind of inspired my whole show. And it is, if you scroll down, hostess please, thank you. They are digital photo prints and they're 24 by 36 inches. And I really think they kind of encapsulate the whole idea of my show. So my second piece that I did is Confrontation. So this is a series of 12. And I used milk as my setting in the water and paint as my medium. And for this one, I really wanted to juxtapose the idea of self and this serene serenity kind of idea, to where, you know, there's things that you struggle with within your body, and asking yourself these questions of, are you comfortable in your body and do you love your body? And that just brings up the idea of, again, loving yourself. And then piece number 3 is called Inside. So this one I kind of wanted to leave up to the viewers to, you know, look at it themselves and see what they take away from it. I did want to bring up the idea of body dysmorphic disorder, which is a disorder where people kind of pick at certain things within their body and it constantly grows on them, even though there might not be anything wrong with them. They still see it, and that's something that I know people in my family have struggled with, I have struggled with. So that is kind of a different way of attacking this and seeing it. And these short little GIF or animated videos are made out of wax, and then I edited them so that they would move and wiggle in a really cool way that would kind of give you the idea of skin or something morphing, going again with BDD, which is body dysmorphic disorder. And that is my exhibition, and I really feel like I tried to encapsulate the idea of skin and just body and being positive, but also bring up negative aspects. And then, so I just want to thank everybody. And also I'm going to introduce the next artist, Sarah Valente. She's really great. She works with really ooey and gooey stuff. So she's next.
I thought we would do the Q&A first for this group. So thank you, Madison. And Sarah will be in the next group, but I think we would do first the Q&A. So I'm looking if I see any questions in the Q&A. I don't see anything. So
I have some that I can ask.
okay.
And if anybody wants to add any in either the chat or the Q&A, that's fine. Let's see. Okay, so we'll ask questions right now. We'll take about 10 minutes or so to have some discussion on the 3 artists that we just saw the work of. And then we can go on to the next group of artists. And the first question is for Madison. And the question is, what inspired you to work with body image?
So what inspired me was mainly just from personal experiences. I grew up kind of in a family. I have 3 sisters. We're all girls, all women. So I feel like that's something that comes up a lot is body image, something that I've seen in my older sisters and even in my younger sibling. So for instance, like my first piece, Peak, inspired me because while I was taking those pictures, my model was my sister. And I think she has such a great, beautiful body and she needs to embrace it. And she's someone that has struggled with anorexia. So while I was taking the pictures, she kind of said to me, she's like, these are making me like kind of critique my body. I don't know if I like them. And I kind of looked at her and I was like, no, like these are beautiful. Like this is so strong. And I think you need to look at these and kind of look at them in a way that makes you think, okay, I'm art. My curves and my body are art. And I kind of tried to push that further.
One more follow-up question, also for Madison. In your show Skin, you experiment a lot with capturing different textures and how they interact with human skin. Has any particular substance or material crossed your mind that you might possibly want to work with in the future?
Not in particular, no. I definitely want to work more with wax and water and paints. And also combining photography with painting is something I definitely want to explore in the future. I really like things that kind of look like skin but aren't skin and also can relate to the body in ways that, you know, you wouldn't think of on the regular. But yeah, I think that's my answer for that question.
Cool. And then we're kind of working backwards here. We have a couple questions for Sam. And one question, well, I also had a question about this, but one person asked, why only white paper? And I wondered about the paper that you choose to use also, because I noticed for like the rosary piece, you use paper that had text on it. And I think also the terrarium piece also, did that paper have text on it too? And I wonder about like how you make decisions about what kind of paper to use, if it's primarily kind of the structural possibilities of the paper, or if it has to do with kind of interacting with what the original source material was, or how you think about that.
Okay, so so for the paper houses, that I use watercolor paper, and that's mainly structural. I needed something that was sturdy enough that would stand up and it would be substantial so that the pieces could. Rosary, that actually came from a book of government, and so if you were to go back, you'd see that there's like a band around the book. Can you guys still hear me? I just got a note about my connection.
Connection.
So yeah,
is
okay,
a little
if you go
iffy.
back, you see that there's a. Okay. All right. Yeah. Anyway, belly band around the book, and it says, "How can we be free without chaos?" And or how free can we be without chaos? And I kind of liked that. Like I said, the whole book was about government. It was talking about like critiques of that, and I actually think it created this amazing conversation between like the separation of church and state, And I chose the quote about chaos to kind of stand out as the belly band because of all of the issues that have happened. Sorry, we got a phone ringing. All the issues that have happened because of this almost blurred line between church and state. And yeah, it ended up just relating back because trying to have a relationship with religion, you kind of think, you turn to your God in times of tragedy, but also in times of tragedy, you ask, how could you let this happen? And then for the terrarium, I chose book pages. I prefer to use book pages. I like the way they feel. I think it's a softer paper and I find it easier to work with. And especially because you could see there's a lot of things that are round and things that are supposed to be much more malleable within that terrarium. So I needed a softer paper.
Cool, thank you. And then questions for Jalen. Let's see, I have to move this window over a little bit. How did you go about choosing the historical pieces that you would reinvent? Did those particular pieces have any significance to you? And I guess I would also add, is there another piece that you've been wanting to recontextualize or would like to work with in the future?
So there are a couple of pieces in particular that I had originally, upon viewing, instantly thought, well, how will I go about kind of like recontextualizing this? For example, the one with Olympia by Manet, that one in particular, I had taken this art history, like this French art history course last semester. And upon first looking at that painting and the relationship between, or how the white woman in the image was being kind of like put out and exemplified. And even then, there's still this relationship in regard to, if you know the history of like the painting, kind of like with the male gaze and like her and just her like status within society at that point. I feel like that conversation alone, and even having like the Black woman as a slave in the foreground, ultimately spoke to me where I was like, okay, now I really want to like kind of do something with this. So in regard to that painting, I had the idea of shooting a Black woman subject and having her be in the place of the white woman or where she's at. But also it kind of changed the narrative as far as her not being nude, because in the original she's nude, but her being dressed like kind of elegantly and sitting on the bed, at the same time being served by the person who was the actual original girl, like laying down in the painting. So I had that idea where I was like, wouldn't it, and I don't know, part of me when I was working on this, I kind of like, if anything, there's this sort of like irony in it, and I kind of found it funny in a sense when I like kind of like switched the roles and placed her head like where like the other woman's head was. So that was one painting in particular where I instantaneously had this sort of like thing where I was like, okay, I really want to like redo this painting. Even with Vermeer's painting the girl with the pearl earring, I think it's just an iconic piece that has a female subject in it. And I was just like, well, I want to see this done with like a Black woman subject instead. Because part of me wanted to have Black women look at these paintings and feel like uplifted, and also feel like, well, yeah, feel uplifted in a sense where like they're being placed into the portrait in a positive light, where most of the time in paintings like this back then, if there were Black women in there, they were used as like I want to say like a device in the background, or a way to kind of like make the white woman subject look better. Another piece in particular that I had originally saw and I was like, I kind of formed a relationship with was The Birth of Venus. The one thing that I really admired about that painting in particular was, I guess like her body shape, because if you're familiar with the original painting, it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but even though it's not as ideal, I guess, in our own society, it's like I want to say like a more realistic kind of like form, if anything, or a more realistic like representation in my eyes, because I kind of like related when I saw her body. So I was like, well, I want to like put myself into the painting and like make myself like Venus. So that was kind of one thing where I had that sort of like relationship with the painting. And yeah, it was kind of like a way, if anything, kind of like, I guess, liberating in a sense for me, where I could just see myself like in that painting and kind of like see myself representing Venus. So hopefully that answers the question. I kind of bounced around a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. let's see, I think just one more quick question. And Jalen, you talked about artists that you're interested in, or works of art that have kind of inspired or powered your work. And let's see, Madison, are there any artists in particular that you're really interested in or that have inspired your work?
So last semester and this semester, definitely Janine Antoni. She inspires me a lot just because of her work, how it has to do with process. Because I like to kind of include that in my work. And I think the way she uses the body in her pieces is really spectacular.
Cool, thank you. Are we ready to go on to the round 2 artists?
I believe there's some questions in the Q&A.
Should we save some of them for the end depending on time?
I think yeah, we're kind of running out of time, right?
Well,
I think there's a few questions for Sam that I think you can answer quite quickly. So Sam, the one question is, how do you decide what kind of paper you use for your composition? Anita Allen asks, what kind of adhesive do you use? And then what inspired you to work with paper? So I don't know, maybe you can very quickly answer.
I'm actually trying to type out some answers now sitting here, but for quick answers, what kind of paper I use, it largely depends on utility. Like I was saying before, like if I need something to stand up and be sturdy, I'll pick a heavier paper, like a heavy body printmaking paper, or the watercolor paper is actually my favorite because I like the textures on it. As far as utility, or I like book pages because like there's a story already embedded, and what I'm trying to work on, and I made actually an independent study for myself, is how do I get the content on the paper or fabric or whatever I'm using to relate back to the whole subject at hand. What kind of adhesive do I use? For those paper houses, I actually have mounting tape. So I have like the mounting foam, the double-sided mounting foam. I'm able to stick, otherwise it'll just be like Elmer's glue or glue stick. And inspired me to work with paper. It was actually Mackey's book arts class that inspired me, or it actually got me into paper, and then from there I kind of just figured out that I'm good at it. So, not to be cocky, that's what I went for. Yeah. If there's any more questions, we'll do some more later, but thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so then I think we're moving to group 2. So the first student in group 2 is Sarah Valente, who has some beautiful work and installation to share with you.
Hello, my name is Sarah Valente, and my show is called Living Room. So the point of Living Room is I was trying to create like an internal space that feels like very visceral, kind of like you're in the body, because the entire room is supposed to relate the body to a living room itself, because it is our living room when you think about it. So within the living room, I have 4 main pieces, the most important one being the painting on the wall, and then everything else is kind of a reaction to that piece. So I wanted to invite the viewer to kind of self-reflect on what makes up their self. So within a self, there's like your physical self, which is like your skin, like the parts that people see, and then your mind. So I've kind of just been fascinated with this idea of like your skin's ability to record and your mind's ability to record, and like how that shapes you as a person. And like among those lines, I was just encountering, like sorry, I'm really nervous.
Oh.
It's like hard to talk about it because like it's a very like self-explorative project, and like when you're thinking about like what makes you who you are, why you make the decisions you make, like your perceived self as opposed to your actual self, and like the decisions that go into that, it's kind of like a rabbit hole of like, I don't know, there's just like a lot to learn about yourself, I guess, which is why the painting is called declension. It means like the deterioration or like the decline of something, because like the nature of these subjects is like the more you think about it, the more you realize like you don't really know as much about yourself as you might think you do. So in conclusion, I wanted this space to be a place where people could reflect on the decisions they make, what it says about your true self and your perceived self, and kind of which sphere controls you more. And the more you think about that, it's like very tangled, whether you're living for yourself or kind of living for other people. So yeah, I think that is all. Hopefully that made sense. So the next artist is Hallie Luttrell, and her paintings will blow your mind.
Thank you, Sarah. I always enjoy hearing about your work because it is a rare occurrence that you talk about your work, so everyone should feel very blessed. Okay, so my solo show this year is called The Male Gaze Interrupts. These confrontational works comment on the intrusive nature of the male gaze. They speak to the feminist movement, and the titles are feminist replies cut off by a prolonged sound mark, and that's representative of the male gaze. By realistically depicting these personal moments of the lives of these women, paired with mixed media that is reminiscent of femininity, my work exemplifies how the male gaze is a constant interruption within the public and private lives of anyone who identifies as a woman. So that's the blurb I've prepared. I am really passionate about this, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to make these paintings. I am an oil painter, and I enjoy using mixed media, and I look forward to making many, many more of these. I work from photography, so I use photographs as reference pictures and just paint them. So I'm looking forward to your questions, and thank you for letting me speak about my work. The next artist is absolutely amazing, Lucia. You should be very excited to see these very interesting works, so thank you.
Hello, thank you, Hallie. My name is Lucia, and my show is called Reap What You Sow. So I'm sure you've heard that that grouping of words before, because it is like a proverb, and I think that that kind of sums up everything I'm trying to say in simplest terms. Because if you look it up, it means like having to face the consequences of your actions. So I'm looking at all these domestic values and expectations and bringing them into a frame. I have right here on the screen right now is a quilt that I made with kind of just fabric that I found lying around, and some prints. This is like the full installation where you can see my fake cake that I made, and my chair and the baby carriage. So it's all these symbols of domestic life, of things that are both like nostalgic and almost I don't know the exact word, in a way like heartwarming, like, but at the same time there's something off about them, like there's baby heads lying on the floor, and so it's this in between of what's beautiful and reminiscent, and what's still wrong about that. In my little like blurb that I have in the beginning, I talk about how I would sum this up is I'm exploring what it means to have like tradition, womanhood, self-preservation, and consumption. I don't know. I think this was like the next step for me I just really like looking at traditional things. I like a lot of these prints that I have that you're seeing right now are from family photos. And I did a lot of research on my family, just trying to figure out some family stories and find these really just in the moment pictures, like this one right now called Celebration with the cake. It's my grandfather and his two brothers. And I found all these pictures where every year his mom took pictures of them with the cake. And it's interesting to see like how he's growing up and the different emotions he has every year. And looking at that picture versus all these other pictures that I collected, I started trying to see how they connected themselves. And that really started to be about motherhood and my anxieties about motherhood and matriarchy. Trying to think of what I really want to end on. Just having to face your creation, face your child. There's the cake, there's the seat that your mother sat in, that your mother's mother sat on, and now it's your seat, and what will you do with it? Yeah, that's it. Thank you. This is like super nerve-wracking, but also super cool. Thanks to all the other artists that have gone so far and to the ones coming next. My dear friend and fellow printmaker, Shelly Cruz, is next. And I'm excited to see that.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Shelly Cruz. My show Nopalandia features a combination of digital work and printmaking to further explore the realms of my Mexican culture. So in this show, I investigate indigenous textile designs, translating them into linoleum block prints that covered the installation that my show was up in. My digital work explores ideas of femininity and spirituality within my culture. Basically, the term Nopalandia is a made-up word. It's a conjunction of the word nopal and the word land, which translates to the land of nopales. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. So the first two images are they're me with a cactus on my forehead and a cactus on my chest. And then the words are a phrase, a Mexican phrase that basically translates to cactus on the forehead and in the heart. So basically nopal en la frente y en el corazón. That being that I am like taking pride in my indigenous features and my brown skin. So I carry my nopal en my frente because my features are very strong and I take pride in that. For the next two images, the first one is a collage and the word chingona means like badass. And I wanted to like play with religious imagery like Sacred Heart. And I wanted to contradict that with the word chingona and the nudity that's being presented and the nopales, of course, because land of the nopales. And then the next image, which is Protección pal mal de ojo, is like basically just touching on spirituality and like the evil eye. I'm pretty sure some of us have heard that. I know it's like very popular or like a very big thing in my culture. It's not necessarily something that's intentional, but like people just have like a bad glare or like evil glare and it like gives you bad luck or whatever. And most babies carry that little brown thing with the image of Virgin of Guadalupe or the image of St. Jude. and it basically protects them from whatever evil, since they're such, like, they're fresh into this world and they're affected by, like, I guess the evil eye that can be like directed towards them. And we call those pieces ojo de venado, which is deer eye, and that's why the deer is on that corner over there. And then on the lower corner, there's deer eyes, just like the like specific deer eye. And then the egg we use to like cleanse our energy. And I just want to add the cactus in the back because it's a recurrent theme in my work, because they're culturally significant to me. And yeah, that's pretty much my work. And these are the prints that I presented in the installation, and they covered the entire space. And the next artist we will be talking about is my fellow colleague, Lily Gilston.
Thanks, Shelley. So thank you all for coming. First off, I want to congratulate my colleagues. They've all done such incredible work this semester. We've really pulled through and it's been an honor to work with them for the past, well, I guess almost 4 years now. So cheers to you guys. So I work primarily in extended media and installation with a focus in fiber art and sculpture, and most recently photography. So my work is largely about the process and the time it takes to, I'm gonna try to multitask here, and the time it takes to weave and stitch and bring materials together in different ways. So I'll just scroll through this at the same time. So for the show, I wanted to create an experience for the viewer that extended beyond the glass windows, an installation that's specific to the time and place that it's in. The final installation, here's another view from inside the gallery. The final installation was a culmination of what I've been working on since the summer. So that is collecting sticks and branches and investigating our relationship with the environment and creating a space that emulates a feeling of both peace and awe at the same time. So I'll keep going. And as a female artist working in installation, I think it's important to think about space and taking up space and how much space we're allowed before we're surpassing boundaries and making others uncomfortable. Because my work is at times confrontational, I'm always thinking of ways to break those boundaries. And this show is an investigation into that dialogue that I intend to continue into the senior thesis work. Okay. Up next, we have another one of my very talented colleagues, Addison Cooper. So let me pull up that. Addison, are you here?
I think Addison said to skip him for right now because he was on his way to a stable Wi-Fi area.
Oh, right. Okay. So I think that takes us into the Q&A for this section, I believe.
Great. Lisa, do you want to do the questions, or I can too? Some of the questions did get answered in the chat, just, in typing in the chat, but there are still a few questions floating out there. Hallie, can you discuss the use of found materials in your work?
Yes. So the 3D elements, like I said, are reminiscent of femininity. So I use elements like lace and sheer fabric and glitter and rhinestones and mirrors, all to represent like common themes that are inherent with femininity, and also things that remind you of the almost social constructs for women. But also it stems more from that, although today I have the privilege to pursue an art career as a young woman, I know it's a privilege because there were many, many women in the history of time who were not able to do that because of the fact that they were a woman. And I know this, so I like to be reminded of that. But I also think that it's about women art, because I find that concept very important, because a lot of women artists' work have been passed over, not just modern day contemporary works, due to gender gaps. It's more so about the craft and things that were never considered art because they were crafty things like rhinestones and glitter and fabric and sewing and crocheting and all that. And I am really inspired by that, because when you think about rhinestones and glitter, you don't really think about traditional oil painting and great artists and why are there no women artists and all of those concepts, or why are there no great women artists, rather. So I think the use of found materials like these are so crucial to my work because of the fact that they are reminiscent of those things and they tie into the concept so much more. And I think that really just propels my work forward. So I definitely will be continuing the usage of those kind of things in my work, even though I might not always be working on feminist artworks. I think that mixed media in general is very interesting to put with oil paint. So thank you for that question.
Oh, thank you. And Lucia, can you, excuse me, can you talk about the color combinations that you selected to use in your print series?
Sure. I like working with, I'm sure you saw in the background, it was like an orangey terracotta color. That's like, it's something I'm drawn to in general. I think as an artist, especially while you're still a student, a lot of what being a student artist means is trying to figure out why you make the same choices you do again and again. And this is one of those things where, I mean, first of all, I chose it because it's a dark blue. I'm not sure if you can tell from some of the photos, dark blue with terracotta. So they are complementary colors. So that's one reason. But I also, I think as an artist, it's good to explore the things that you use over and over again and try to make sense of them. I think, especially working with family photos, it made sense, even in just a print sense, when you think of like photography and you think of like retro family photos, like a burnt sienna is very similar to, I cannot think of what that color in photography is, but it's not black and white, but it's kind of
like sepia tone or sepia.
Tone. Yeah, like something that you can tell is old. And I kind of think that goes with my work.
Cool. And there was another question about your work also. Do you take inspiration from any art historical movements or specific artists?
I wouldn't say, yes, definitely. I wouldn't say specific movements necessarily, but just in general, I like to do a lot of research and bring it back to art history or different things that I'm interested in. Something I'm really interested in right now is like folk art, and like right now on the screen you can see the basket. That is a symbol that I always see in like old-fashioned cross stitch, and I think that's so cool, because I'm personally, like, I'm working with women's work and I'm exploring that kind of thing, but then I'm using this symbol that's always seen in cross stitch, and that my grandma has cross stitched time and time again. So even just taking from, I love a lot of sculpture artists and print artists like Erwin Wurm and Delita Martin, but I also am really interested in some stuff that's not, it's not always known the specific artist, but like stamps, like old stamps. Something I'm really interested, that I just learned about a few days ago, is like ex Libris stuff, like the little prints that are in the beginning of old books to mark like who it belongs to, and they're so like interesting and pretty, and I think things like that, you see them but you don't always realize how they affect you or how they influence you, but they stick in your mind and they stay with you and they influence you. And I definitely feel that way.
Cool, thank you. I also have a couple questions for Lily. Lily, love the minimal yet specific use of color in your show. Is there a spiritual relationship between the materials you use?
Thank you for the question. I think, yeah, there is kind of like a spiritual relationship. I think that also has to do with sort of like the process of weaving. I've learned, of course, it's a really long process and very repetitive, but it's also very intuitive. And you kind of, it's like meditative. So while you're, doing the same motion with your hands, you have a lot of time to kind of think about what you're making. And so, yeah, I guess spirituality has something to do with it. And I also think, like, as it came together, the piece, like the final installation, like as a whole, was, I would say, very intuitive. I think is a good word, because I kind of just walked into the space with a pile of sticks and some woven fabric, and it came together into like something I'm really proud of. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. There's another question also about your work about the sound that was part of the installation. Can you speak about the sound component in your installation?
Yeah, so I've been really interested in sound since I did my, I think it was my final for Sculpture 2. I first experimented with sound, kind of as like soundscape, to kind of create a space that extends beyond, like installation that extends beyond just like sculpture, if that makes sense. So I like the process of like of building up layers to sounds. And if anyone was at the opening, I kind of hid the speaker. So a lot of people were confused because they thought it was, someone talking behind them and like whispering behind them. If you get a chance to listen to it, it's like 8 minutes long, so we don't have to now. But yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Let's see. For Sarah, can you explain the phrase self-exploitation can be a gesture of our control or our condemnation, and what that means with your work?
Yeah, so I'm talking about self-exploitation in the way whereas our appearance is kind of for other people. So yes, you do have the ability to change how you look, and that can be empowering because like you're taking control of that part of your identity. But like if you're doing that for other people, you're kind of exploiting yourself. And then that would be the condemnation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. So it's, yeah, I think that it has something to do not just with about decisions you're making for yourself, but also kind of what kind of influence outside yourself has on it then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. And then a couple questions for Shelley. First, please talk about your relationship to printmaking and why that medium is so important to you.
So I really enjoy printmaking just because it's like very like crafty and like even though you can basically, I'm quoting Lucia here, but even though you can basically draw like these images or like just print these out on a regular printer, I think it's fun that you can, for fun for a lack of a better word, but like to be able to carve them and like individually screen print each image. And like I feel like it relates to other crafts like I can't think of any right now. It relates to like indigenous crafts, how they weave these fabrics when you can just go out and buy these fabrics. Like I think the relationship is so cool.
Yeah, and I love that you were able to kind of take over that entire wall with your images. That's really, I love seeing both the kind of whole installation view and the installation detail of that, of your show. And then another question for you is, where do you feel that your work would be most impactful?
So I've always said this, but I create work for like people of color, most importantly like children, because I know I grew up in New Brunswick, and I feel like I didn't have any like representation. Like I took a lot of art classes, and there was never that representation there for me. And I just wanted to be that representation for the kids in New Brunswick and like other cities, and just inspire them.
Cool, thank you. And then there's just one quick last comment, which is someone just mentioned, I'm intrigued at how the concept of found materials crosses over between Hallie and Lucia's work. And it seems like actually that probably crosses over into the work of quite a few of you. It's interesting to see those connections tonight.
If I could say something to that, I think that just the culmination of all these years working together and feeding off of each other and getting like just inspiration from each other, doing the same projects. I think we all have our own styles, but I think it's been a really enriching process learning from my colleagues and just being better from them. So I feel like our work has this connection that's even just unspoken. So we all have different concepts, we all have different styles, but we are a group in some way or another, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
That's great. I think we're definitely all seeing you as a group. Yeah.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, I also think as like we, especially at TCNJ, the art program is predominantly women. So like when you think about that, we are women making women's work, and what we decide as women's work will be women's, I don't know, like it will be women's work. So it's like, it's, that just sounded like a mess, but I hope you know what I mean. I just think in some ways, even though me and Hallie, our art is so is very different, we are trying to tackle some of the same ideas of just womanhood and domestic life, and just how we approach that is differently, even if some of the messages are the same. And that's what's awesome about going to school and being with with colleagues and just exploring those kind of ideas. It's, yeah, just, it's awesome.
I know this isn't my group, but I just kind of want to add to that too, where it's like, you know, being with each other, we've watched each other through this process of self-exploration. And I think a lot of our work reflects that, where Lucia, you know, she's looking at like her thoughts on domesticity and kind of the, you know, the cycle of mothers to daughter, and Hallie is going through this process of you know, femininity and womanhood, and what does it mean to be objectified, and how do we fight that? And I know me with my houses, it was a really big deal, and Lily just trying to find this other way to escape, and you know, and other artists that are coming, and everybody that we talked about. So yeah, I've been happy to work with everybody, because I think we were all able to pull things out of each other that we wouldn't otherwise have.
Cool. Should we move along to the next group?
Yeah, I think the next presenter is Ash.
I'd like to thank all my colleagues, as well as all the professors who have helped me through this, and the staff and the dean for allowing us to use the space in the art gallery. So this is my solo show, Instinctual. It features sculpture, installation, taxidermy, and fiber. I worked with various materials such as creating natural dyes, weaving, and manipulating craft wire to create sculptural forms. I wanted to create a kind of tension with the manufactured materials versus the natural material or objects that I used. My sculpture consists of 3 sculptures. Fragile, which is this first one. Decomposition, which is my taxidermy piece. And then lastly, Womb, which is a woven crate and a sculpture wire wolf. Conceptually, I'm interested in human psychology stripped of context and rationalization, and then projected onto animals. I really wanted to create a surreal realm of my own mind and fears, and a kind of safe space for me to heal from past traumas that can also relate to other women and also men who have similar traumas to me. So yeah, thank you. This is the last piece. And then while we're finishing up looking at my pieces, I'd like to send it off to my colleague Ryan, who is a concert photographer who is now exploring painting, sculpture, and installation.
Thank you so much, Ash. So as we get to mine, so for my solo show titled Mr. Fluorescent, like Ash said, it was me exploring myself further as an artist. Prior to coming to TCNJ, I really felt like I had myself in a box where I was mainly into photography, specifically concert photography. And once the pandemic happened, that kind of all went away. So essentially I had to adapt and learn how to become a better artist. And these are the pieces. So we can start scrolling down. So this is the full installation view. We can keep on going down. So the first piece is Untitled. It is an acrylic pouring painting, using fluorescent paints. I guess throughout the whole process of exploring this exhibition, I kind of like, I guess it's an attraction to the lights. I feel like, you know, missing the glamour and the lights of all the shows I used to shoot. I feel like I was kind of searching for a new outlet or a new way to get that fill of excitement. So that's what I was getting out of these paintings as we keep scrolling down. And one of my more recent pieces I made titled Unreleased Tapes. So for this, I used fluorescent tape on canvas, and then I took old vinyl sleeves that were unused and I cut them out and collaged it onto the canvas. And then for the next piece, one that I made in 2019, which honestly might have been the whole start of me getting into sculpture making and kind of, expanding as an artist. After doing this one in 2019, I installed it. It was originally unpainted and then painted it with fluorescent and installed it. These next two are also acrylic pouring paintings, titled Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. Again, just exploring the whole fluorescent psychedelic euphoria feel through the work. And I believe lastly, which one of my favorite, I think, pieces was Body and Parts, which is an installation. What was my once first bass guitar given to me when I tried to become a musician. I disassembled it, spray painted it fluorescent, had to sand it down. And I don't know, it almost feels like what's going on today with the music scene, like everything's broken, it's all apart, like it's just disassembled. But it was very, fun to explore this and become a better artist out of all this. And I appreciate all my peers who continue to critique me and push me farther, And I would like to introduce my colleague, Stephanie Rosenthal.
Thank you, Ryan. It's really exciting to be here today. Super nerve-wracking, but exciting. So for my solo show, I was interested in exploring color, light, and layering to express my relationship to memories and emotions, and kind of like what they evoke for myself and possibly my audience members if they can relate. I touch on a few different areas, including family, the self, and home, which I feel are some of the most significant things in shaping who I am today. So, going to my first piece, I created an installation, which is a little bit new for me, which is representative of the fragility of memories. I was initially inspired by this image my dad, who's somewhere out there, um, photoshopped of my brother and I in a bubble when we were little. And it was kind of like a new way of interpreting childhood and kind of trying to reach for that nostalgia and remember what it means to me. I created these spheres, which are like bubbles, and I put iridescent film in them to kind of capture the light to show how like light and color change over time, so do memories. So continuing on to the next piece, this talks about the self and I guess what it means to me. So I used to be like really self-conscious, and this was a way of my freckles, and this was a way of kind of embracing that. One day I decided to just like connect them all like a game, and I turned them into like these constellations on my face. So this is an interpretation of that. And I incorporated my own family members' constellations into it to kind of make it more personal. Um, so yeah, self-consciousness is something a lot of people relate to, and it's just one of the many like kind of key things that has also like shaped who I am. So continuing on, I made a couple tunnel books, and I guess working with tunnel books allowed me to create the space that I needed to create a sort of metaphorical and literal foreground, middle ground, and background. This piece depicts like the distance that I kind of feel from home. And so I used all these different textures and layers to kind of cover it up. And for the next one, I used color and layering to kind of show this separation with home. A lot of people often like move around, they kind of feel distant. So these two pieces combined, I guess, show trying to discuss, I guess, kind of forgetting, like maybe childhood and home, and understanding like what it means to move around and figure out like what home is, where home is. So all together, these pieces kind of work to figure out like what elements have shaped a person, and who we are. And this is my entire installation all together, which will be viewed tomorrow in person at TCNJ. Um, so I actually created a tunnel book out of my entire installation, which was super difficult, but I think it was effective in kind of translating these, I guess, like paths of the mind when you're like exploring these different layers of it, trying to figure out how far back you can go. And I created it sheer so that way it's kind of changing whether it's daylight or I put artificial light, just like how memories change. So that is everything. And then moving on to introduce my colleague Jamie and her photographs.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say thank you to Steph. Everyone's stuff is amazing. So my show was basically, well, my show is called Urban Escape, and it features 6 images that are inspired by fashion photography. And they all take place in varying abandoned locations across New Jersey. And this idea of having this clash of like fashion with an abandoned place was kind of to reflect the ideas of like what everyone has been feeling throughout the pandemic and being in quarantine and all these feelings of like being trapped in this and like all of that. So all the images have are titled with feelings that I personally have felt throughout quarantine. So some of them are all of them are claustrophobia, release me, overcast, trapped, disconnected, and nostalgia. And these basically speak to like everything that everyone has been feeling about getting back to normal life since the pandemic. And the idea of like pairing that with fashion is kind of like a mental escape. So it's showing these models are trying to escape this reality, and they like it's a representation of what everyone wants to be doing while we're trapped in in our homes, and we can't really do much at the moment. But through this piece, I wanted to capture that while also staying true to my fashion roots. I love sticking to fashion photography. So yeah, this was really fun to do. That's about all I have to say. I think next we have Addison, if I'm not mistaken, if his Wi-Fi is working now.
Addison, can you say something? Can we make sure you are here?
I don't think he's in the Zoom call. I don't see him.
I
He
don't.
said he's reconnecting right now. He's trying to get stable Wi-Fi.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, I will just ask some questions that we have from the Q&A and from the list for different questions I'm getting in the chat. So first, Ryan, Anita says, it's great to see your work across disciplines. How did you first connect with the fluorescent palettes? How have you worked with, black paint, black light paint so far?
Thank you for the question, Anita. So I guess my exposure to like the fluorescent palette was through this Russian artist named Alex. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I'll put it in the chat. But I just like fell in love with a lot of his work. It's very bright. He does a lot of like kinetic artwork sculptures, which I think is just really insane and something I want to eventually progress my work into. But he's an amazing painter, and the palettes and the bright lights and everything from his work just really, caught my eye, and it's what kind of started this exploration into fluorescent art. Previous to that, I have not used black light paint before until this exploration.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question for Stephanie. Can you further discuss why you chose to transform the installation space the way you did? What inspired you, and why the sheer material?
Yeah, so I guess one of my main sources of inspiration, I was asking a few different people, how do I create this space? Lily was actually the one who suggested I turned the whole thing into a tunnel book. So it was a big feat to accomplish, but I got it done. A couple artists that I look at for inspiration would be Doho Sa, who creates these large polyester sheer homes, and also Andrea Dezo, who creates these huge tunnel book installations. So it was kind of like, I guess, a nod to both of them, putting it together to create this.
Thank you. Interesting. It's so interesting to hear from all of you some more thoughts behind what you were thinking about as you were making it. The next question is for Ash. I'm reading. So Ash, why wolves? What does it mean to you to use wolves as a symbol? And why do you use materials like meat, bones, instead of stand-ins made out of clay or other materials?
So I use wolves specifically to tailor towards my trauma being a sexual assault victim. To me, the wolf feels predatorial, but also very familiar to me. And then in regards to why do I use materials such as meat and bones, I think that I'm drawn to them because of how complex they are compared to materials such as clay, wood making. I like that I can't really figure out what's the outcome gonna be and that risk that I take with using these materials. For specifically, I know I don't have like any meat sculptures in this, but in the past, I like that was a huge risk for this installation. It was really kind of just going off of what I was hearing from Professor Mackey about dyes, and then also encouraging me to explore materials that are a little bit more difficult with you, Lisa, a lot. You encouraged me to go towards taxidermy. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, well, I just was curious to see how you can explore the real together with the symbolic, and how to bring all these elements together. Yeah. No, I think it is the combination of media are really enriching everything, and also the type of work you do with wire sculpture and with having the metal wires and thread at the same time, creating very different quality lines are very effective. Okay, do we have more questions? I mean, I can come up with some more questions. I think we're looking for Edison at this point, right? And see if can.
Yeah, and Addison is having trouble getting stable enough internet for Zoom to let him join, I think. So I resent the invitation, but I think there's just not a good connection wherever they are. But we could do a couple more questions. There was a question for Ryan. What was your biggest struggle when exploring other mediums as a concert photographer? Did you find the process of exploring other mediums to be difficult or to be liberating?
That's a really good question. So I guess the hardest struggle was, one thing like that I've pointed out to, I feel like many of my colleagues, I'm just, very impressed by a lot of the paintings that I see, put out by a lot of them. So I guess one thing that that started was I was started with the acrylic pouring paintings, and I guess it was just like trying to hold my standard to how I see like how good, you know, my peers are. So I was always just trying to do something that I felt like was good enough, you know, to be in the same room. Um, what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
I was muted. Was it liberating, or did it feel, was it just difficult?
I guess you can say it was liberating because, you know, when the pandemic happened, I hadn't touched my camera for a few months. I hadn't edited anything for a few months. I just felt very disconnected. So to be able to make art again and still connect its, you know, some of the pieces to, you know, my concert life and all that, it felt really good to be able to do that. Um, and I guess some of that inspiration also came from another photographer, Mick Rock, who when he fell down on his luck, you know, he went to collaging his photos and just tried to adapt as an artist. So I guess that's something I learned, you know, you need to constantly try to do.
To sort of keep reinventing and rethinking. Yeah. Did you have a question, Liselotte?
Yeah, I have a question. I thought for Jamie also. But thank you, Ryan. That sounds really interesting, and it's continuous challenge. So Jamie, since the pandemic is the context of the series, why did you choose to photograph the models without masks?
I was basically focusing on someone alone in a space. So I thought, like when you're stuck in your home, you don't wear a mask. So I thought of doing that, and I thought it just like didn't seem as connected to like exactly what I was going for, because everyone was so like alone. And I used like these abandoned spaces because I thought like it further pushed that like loneliness of every photo. And I didn't think like it needed that extra push, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand. And I think it's one of the questions that had come up. But yeah, no, I think the environment also really speaks of isolation as well. And I think you made that work really well. Okay, does anyone have any more questions? I'm really sad for Edison, but I think we need to wrap this up. We have seen so much amazing work, and I think we have heard so many interesting answers. Is there any news from Edison? I can't really see. He hasn't joined so far, right?
I'll double check.
Yeah, I'm trying to double check as I speak. I see it. I don't see him.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about Zoom to troubleshoot beyond just sending the invitation again, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, then I think we have to call it a night. Thank you all so much for your wonderful, wonderful explanations and demonstrations of your work. And it was so interesting to hear so much. I learned so much about your work tonight. I have to say, it was really fascinating. And I think most of the audience really enjoyed it. I really thank the audience for staying with us and listening to everything, and also for all your questions and input for the students. So thank you guys. Great work.